This is the Data Slice, hosted by the Data Science Alliance. It's where we sit down to talk all things data science, AI, and tech, any way you slice it. I'm Callan Hoffman, and joining us on the podcast today is Kay Monnette. Super excited for our podcast friends to meet you because you have been so involved with DSA in so many different ways. A little background about Kay is also that she's a product designer at Epic, so I'm really excited to dive into, just the topics of UI, UX design with AI and things like that. But first off, how are you doing? How's your day going so far?
Oh, I'm doing so great. I'm so excited to be here in sunny San Diego. I miss it out here. I can't wait to my goal is to surf when I'm out
Okay,
here.
yeah,
So
enjoy the summer. For context, she no longer lives in San Diego, so we're especially lucky to have you in person with us on the podcast. I know I briefly touched on it, saying that you've been really involved with DSA, but I was thinking for our friends of the pod, could you maybe just tell us a little more about it yourself? What was your journey when you were here in San Diego with DSA all the way through your work with Epic today?
yeah, sure. And I guess to start, I can talk a bit about how I got into product design
Hmm.
in the first place. So when I was a little kid, my dad actually had an IT business. And this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he would take me along with him to the server rooms when he would do IT work, because a lot of times, back then, it was very much like hardware, and I would just sit there um, at these client sites, and the clients would always bring candy for me because I was a little kid, and I would just watch him disassemble computers and pull things apart. As a kid, it was really, really fascinating to me. Yeah, eventually, as I went on to study over at UC San Diego, I was like, wait, what's this thing called user experience design? This is super cool. Didn't even know, this is something I could study. And I totally fell in love with it. And it's really funny because actually I started out as an intern with Data Science Alliance, and I was doing social media management. And I was studying, product design principles at the time. And at one point, I was like, hey, I know I've been doing social media stuff, but could I redesign your website?
Hmm.
And that's kind of how it all started. And kind of from there, we started doing way more product designy stuff. I joined on with DSA full time for a little bit. Yeah, and then I came over to Epic and not the Fortnite company.
To be clear, always good to clarify.
Yeah, the healthcare company. I still have friends and family. They're like, "When's the new Fortnite update going to drop?" I'm like, "No, I
Wish I
don't know."
knew.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, over at Epic, I work on, solving a lot of problems in healthcare, both on the patient and the provider side. And I think it's just been really, really fun for me to, work in kind of a very unique space. But yeah, I'm super excited to be back with DSA. I think the work that y'all are doing with, especially responsible data science, back in 2020 when I was working with y'all, it was important then, but a lot has changed since.
Yeah,
So it's crazy.
definitely. Yeah, what has it been like for you over the years to see how data and AI, the tools that exist, what has it been like to see all of that change in your industry over the years?
Yeah, so actually I mentor students over at UC San Diego's design lab program, and I think getting the students' perspective on this question is really interesting because they're kind of at this pivotal moment where they've been learning for the past 4 years, as things have been changing, and they're just now entering industry. And I think seeing all the different explorations that the students have made with different tools has been inspiring for me. Um, at the core of design is problem solving. And so back when I was a student, Figma, for example, if you're familiar with Figma, it's just
Hmm.
design software, was just getting big. And their, edge at the time was that you were able to design in a way that was more reflective of real life development instead of, like dragging pieces across an artboard, like in an artistic way. You're doing things like auto layout, things that like mimic flex boxes, for example. It's more like creating grids and structures. And so I kind of watched when I was a student as that changed. And I think like all the new tools that are coming out are really just like an advancement of that. It's like enabling us to solve problems more quickly. I've seen students play around with Figma Make is a new thing that they just unveiled where you start prompting the system, maybe you feed it some design stuff and it'll spin up like a live coded prototype like right in front of your eyes. So I think like in the short term, I think that's definitely like going to keep changing. The tools are going to get like more sophisticated, but I think like the core of the role of design, I think hasn't changed yet.
Not yet. Stay
Yeah.
tuned. How have you seen these tools change just kind of, the landscape of the type of work you do, maybe even just in your day to day? Have you seen some big changes?
Um, I think like when I've been doing like a lot of explorations on my own at home, and I feel like I've gone home and played around with like making some websites, trying out like these new tools, and even for like fun passion projects, it's been really great because especially when like I don't have time, it's enabled me to just iterate like much faster.
Mm. Just kind of expediting processes and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like being able to explore, and I think like in design, there's this concept of fidelity. So kind of like if you've seen like lo-fi hip hop beats music, for
Mm.
example, like it's low fidelity sound. And in design, when you're communicating like concepts and ideas, you can do it in varying levels of like fidelity. So like in low fidelity, maybe you're just like using a whiteboard to get across some concepts. And I think like when it comes to high fidelity, it can be a time sink. And I
Mm.
think one of the things that these new tools are doing is allowing us to kind of sometimes skip like those more lower fidelity processes and go straight into something that is immediately interactable. But I will say one of the other things that I've noticed that this tooling has helped some of the design students I've mentored with is communicating in no fidelity.
Mm.
And no fidelity is like really just using like words or a conversation to kind of discuss like a design concept. And I think like the advent of prompting has like really helped students before they even like put a pen to a paper, like they have to think about what it is they're trying to convey or what it is they're trying to build and then convey that to the system. So I think it can also be a helpful like problem solving tool.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have thoughts on what it's like for students? I know you said you mentor, so you've really seen this. What is it like to enter the industry maybe now compared to when you did? Do you think it's more of a challenge or less of a challenge with these tools that are just kind of constantly evolving?
Yeah, and I would say like the design industry is changing. And it kind of always has been though,
True.
right? I think like even the terminology continues to change. Um, some of my design buddies that I've made who've been in the industry for like 10, 20 years, like back then they were just the webmaster.
Hmm.
So it went to like graphic design, UI design, UX design, product design. And I think there was one company I just saw on LinkedIn that announced that, all of their designers are just going to be called designers.
Mm.
And I think it like all comes back to like that concept of problem solving and making sure that like, making stuff is fun and cool, but is the thing you're making actually, solving the problem that you're going after?
Hmm. Yeah. Is it fancy and fun, or is it actually
Yeah.
reaching its goal? Definitely. Well, like we said, so much has always been changing, continues to change. Do you have advice for people? Because I think that can feel maybe overwhelming, staying up to date. So, do you have advice for staying, up to date on the latest trends and tools?
Yeah, I mean, well, trends will always be there. especially in design, there's plenty of like micro trends and bigger trends and tools too. They keep changing. There's so much more fancy stuff that, you can do. And I think it's great to learn that. But the advice that I always give to the students that I mentor over at the design program is to pick the thing that you are interested in and passionate about and go all in. So I had one student group that recently there was a design competition that I was paneling for, and one of the student groups was really, really passionate about helping their target user group go through grief. And the solution that they ended up designing, it wasn't an app, it wasn't a digital solution at all. It was like a museum style exhibition. It was a space where users could walk through and interact with a room in different ways and write messages. And I think that student group ended up winning the entire design competition. And I really think it's because they were passionate about something and they could have gotten bogged down by like all the tools. They could have made a super fancy app, or they could have tried to, take maybe an AI angle since that's very like topical. But I think instead they kind of just they took a big risk. They were super nervous about it. They told us later, they're like, I don't know if this is gonna work. It's not a super fancy solution. I think like the thing they ended up demoing at the end of the competition was just like a really rough like Blender 3D model of what the physical space would look like. But I think they won because it really resonated with people like, oh, I think everybody's gone through grief. I could use this space. Something like connecting it back to your question though on like how can students navigate entering the industry? It's like, uh, do projects like those. It's great to explore the tools out there, but if you solve a real problem that, really touches people, I think like that is such a more compelling case study than kind of just showing off the more technical skills of design.
You mentioned earlier how DSA, we're all about responsible data science and AI. When it comes to design and the type of work you do, what are your thoughts on keeping ethics at the forefront? Are there steps that you think should be taken to ensure data and AI are used responsibly in your type of work?
So I'm going to keep being a broken record about the whole making sure we're solving the right problem thing, but I think that's more important than ever. And I think like one of the big benefits right now is AI has become a more, universal topic. Is there are so many resources out there. Like look at DSA for example. You have the framework for responsible data science practices, and that's available online through like a quick Google search. There are deep research tools out there now. I think like if you're if you're passionate about this and you're working in this space, I would say we're all figuring it out. It's new technology, but I think like don't be afraid to ask questions. As you're working along the way, and I think like that's reflected in DSA's framework. I've been doing a bunch of research on my own, like what what resources are out there right now for free. There's so many. Like IBM is another great example. They just put out their own like playbook for data practices. And I think like no matter, if you're on a team of a bunch of people, no matter what role you are, I think everybody has, a role to play when it comes to building something that's so new, and in some ways, we're still exploring what the capabilities are.
When it comes to that exploration, what are your thoughts on ensuring that things like privacy are protected and there's kind of that trust built with the user?
Yeah, well, you said the word trust, and I really do think that's the important one. And I think from a product designer lens too, making sure that you know who your users are, and think really specifically about that target group of users. Because I think just anecdotally in my own personal life, I've seen so many family and friends around me interact with AI in so many varying ways. So I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. But I will say, like, to all the product designers out there who might be listening to this, I think to keep in mind, like, kind of go back to those design roots because right now it's a very ideal it's a role for idealists, right? Like as designers, I think like I'll speak for myself, but I always want to like create the most perfect cool thing ever. And that's great, but the whole point of being a valuable designer is being able to work under so many varying constraints. And so, just like when you're making a design pitch, if you're making like an ethical AI pitch or a pitch to slow down and make more considerations, factor in the ROI. Um, because that's, I think, what's really going to get traction. And that's actually one of the things that is in the IBM playbook is a guide on how to calculate the ROI of ethical data practices, and also it outlines some of the costs if you don't. And so I think like again, you don't have to do it alone. Everybody is doing a bunch of research and asking a bunch of questions in this space. There are resources out there. Don't be afraid to make a pitch to your team if you think that, there's certain research that should be done, or, that there's a good use case for a specific type of feature, go for it. Go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Has there ever been a time in your career where you felt like the team environment made a big difference, kind of being able to collaborate?
Absolutely. I feel like I've been really lucky just across my career to have worked in like so many collaborative team environments. And DSA, super, super great example. And y'all should be, right? We're all working towards the same goal. But I definitely remember back when I was working at the Data Science Alliance, there were times when we were doing a project and we were like, oh wait, no, wait, we have to go back and we actually have to, build this maybe a different way. And the stakes are high with the work that we were doing. And I think the work that y'all are still doing right now, and I think like it comes back to like all the projects that DSA are taking on, it's all about ways to positively impact the community. But there are definitely risks. And so I think like you said it, right? Like making sure that there's a good communication, good environment. I think like building relationship, building trust with your team members comes a long way uh, when it comes to working on something that can be sensitive.
Hmm. When it comes to AI tools, like we said earlier, there are so many out there these days and they're evolving. Do you have thoughts on ways that designers can kind of keep ethics at the forefront when it comes to picking and choosing those types of tools?
Mm, yeah, that's definitely an area that I'm still researching as well. And I think like zooming way out, even out from design tools, but just like to just living day to day, I think in general, ethical consumption is challenging. I think there's a contract that you make as a user when you're using any sort of service or platform, where I don't always know how my data is going to be used, and I think it's hard. I could like I could build a cabin in the woods and kind of just chill in the cabin, but I think for now I think it's just always about being as informed as you can be, like, as a user, and I think, like, I invite everybody to kind of do their own research on the tools that they're using.
Well, when it comes to AI design and the trends and tools we've been talking about, do you see a certain direction that those types of things are headed or certain ways they'll evolve?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting because I think we're still very much in the early stages of a lot of this new technology. So I recently watched a lecture from Professor Xia. He's a professor at UCSD's Design Lab. And he's been doing a bunch of research in kind of like the generative AI space. And he makes this really powerful analogy of a factory. So there was a point in time during the Industrial Revolution where factories were using steam engines, and it was like this brand new technology. And the whole promise of a steam engine is that it could, cut production time by 30%. It was a really powerful tool, but when all the factories started adopting steam engines, they didn't immediately start getting 30% faster. They had to start physically rearranging things in the factories, changing, the way their production line worked. And so I think like a lot of the tools that we're seeing come out, it's like, oh my gosh, we have this new steam engine. And I think like one of the more long-term things that I see happening is not so much that like right now we can use designers can use AI to design screens faster. But in the future, I imagine that apps will actually design themselves for users in real time.
Hmm.
Instead of, I guess like maybe giving like an example of planning a party. Like right now to plan a party, I have to use like 10 different apps on my phone, right? Like go into my contacts to find out who I'm gonna invite. I have to text everybody. Um, depending on the type of party, maybe it's like a Google Calendar hold. Um, am I doing food at the party? Do I need recipes? Do I need to figure out what to buy for ingredients? But my thought is maybe someday, instead of our user experience being kind of split across all of these different like segmented places to do things, instead maybe it's just a conversation between me and the system saying, hey, I want to plan a party, and suddenly it builds this perfect screen with everything that I need to do to plan the party, and it's kind of all in one place. So I feel like that's, to me, that's an area that could be a really exciting long term.
Mhm.
I do wonder, like, as a designer, if the system is designing the screen, how am I going to be able to apply problem solving? I think that might mean that the role looks very different.
Mhm.
But I think like it's like a genie in a bottle, and I think the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. When it comes to looking back, just on your experience all the way through, when you were still in college and doing internships and then making your way to where you are now, what is it like to take into consideration, how much has changed and, like you said, how much it will continue to change? What's that like to kind of reflect on your journey so far?
Yeah, I mean, so we designers like love our design influencers. There's a few people who like paved the way in the field very early on because it's still like UI and product design is very much still a new field. And I remember reading a book by Steve Krug, who is a very well-known person in the field, and this book was written in like the year 2000. And it is wild how spot on he was about pretty much everything.
Wow.
There was like, okay, there was a page though in that book that was like, Flat design is dead. Flat design is just a trend. And that was back in like the 2000s when we were still using like skeuomorphism to, you know, you would have a save icon and it would be like this really detailed, like beveled button with like a really detailed icon in it. And over time, design flattened. And I remember like being a student in college and reading that section of the book and being like, oh man, what was he thinking on that one? I can't believe he thought, flat design was just a trend, which is so funny because now in like, 2025 with, Apple's new liquid glass UI and a lot of other stuff that I've seen some of the students at UCSD work on, skeuomorphism is back. So I feel like all trends have, cycles, and I think like to keep in mind like the visuals are always going to change, but some things are gonna, come back. I think one trend that I'm really excited about um, is I think like especially in the advent of AI powered tools, you can make a really sleek mock-up very quickly, and it'll look perfect. And the tools have been trained off of really good visuals. But I had a friend recently who was working on his grad program, and like we were out getting dinner, and he was showing us his website he was working on for the program. It was like a website he was making for students, and he was like, "Yeah, I just learned how to do HTML last night." So it's just like white text with like the Times New Roman font and all. It's just a bunch of links. And everyone at the table was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing."
Great job.
Like, don't change a thing. And I think like, we've always been asking our questions like what can't AI do? And it turns out like what AI can't do is create something that is flawed, but imperfect. Imperfect, flawed, but also very human.
Mm.
And I think like we're approaching this wabi-sabi era of design. I've seen a lot of things that students make that, like, oh, like why is that icon, floating slightly off center? Or, like why does this link look a little broken? And it's actually something that's being done very intentionally, and it makes me think back to the first website I ever created. Back when I was 8.
Back in the day.
Yeah, I was super into Neopets. And I kind of went through the same journey where in Neopets, if you're not aware, it's just like an online website. It was like through Flash, and you could like feed your pets, but you could also build these like little shops. And the shops, you could actually like customize your storefront with HTML and CSS. And I recently logged in to my Neopets account, and of course they were like all starving because I haven't fed them in like, 20 years. But I clicked on my shop button and I just saw like the ugliest, most like neon thing. It was like bright red text over like a cyan background with like a magenta tabs list. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cute. And so, I think like I think there's a real hunger for things like that to come back, to bring back kind of like the more scrappy, like obviously handmade and imperfect, but very endearing web pages that I think a lot of us interacted with when we were younger.
Yeah, it's a throwback,
Yeah.
nostalgic. Well, like we've kind of said throughout all of this, there is so much changing, it feels like all the time. Do you have any favorite resources? I know you mentioned that one book you've read. Any favorite resources or platforms you follow that you would recommend for people who maybe want to learn more, just really stay up to date on all this?
Yeah, I would. And I feel like this might be a bit of a cop-out answer, but I really think that a lot of it comes down to like building, a community of, for students. I think there's a lot of design clubs out there. I'm a part of a like local design community in Madison where I'm, living right now. And I think being able to just like not just read about things as they're happening, but talk to people and hear about, their experiences and get their thoughts, I think is really powerful. I have this one friend who's like my article guy, and he's always just sending me articles, and I'm like, that too. If you can find yourself an article guy, or be the article guy if you don't have one, there's not any one place that's going to give you all the information you need. I think like you should seek many sources and many opinions, and share with others. Build that community. I think it's really important.
Be the article guy.
Yeah.
Find an article guy. I love that. Everyone needs an article guy. Well, thank you so much. Really good advice today. And it's so interesting, to get perspective on things like product design. There's so much to stay on top of. So we appreciate, especially like we said, you've been so involved with DSA for so long and you let us bring you on the podcast. So I'm sure we'll have you back again, as we just have more to explore. But, for now, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. It's always fun having you back at DSA.
Oh, thanks, Callum.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and share it with a friend. And don't forget, the Data Science Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we would really appreciate your support. You can do a donation, become a member, volunteer with us, or attend an event. We have lots going on all the time here in San Diego, California. Even if you don't live here, though, you can still get involved. So go to our website, datasciencealliance.org. Otherwise, we'll see you here next time on The Data Slice.